are cut in circles, semicircles, or quarter circles. Let's go to the board and see how it looks like. Let's take a look at the board. We can see that we have three different kinds of flared skirts. Now take a look at the fully flared skirt. As you can see, it's made up of two circles. That means you can see an inner circle and an outer circle. And now what I have done is to show you that this inner circle represents the waist, which of course mathematically is called the circumference. That's what the C is for. Then the length is here. That's between the two, in between the two circles. Now the fully flared skirt is made up totally out of a full circle and having an internal circle. Now if you look at the semi-flared skirt, you can see that it's a semicircle. Obviously it is. And we have the inner semicircle here representing the waist. And of course the distance between the two semicircles will give you the length. Now the third one we have there is a quarter circle. You can see that. And it's called the quarter flared skirt, also known as the A-line skirt. Now it's not as flared as the others, obviously. And you can see that this quarter circle in here, it represents the waist, and the length is in between the two quarter circles. Now this is how they look when you project upon it aerially. That's how it looks like. That means if you open it out and lay it flat on the floor, that's how they look like. Now obviously you have to, let them drop on your body, maybe from your waist, or from the tip of your sleeve, or at the edge of your skirt, or whichever place you like to use them. Now to make our pattern, obviously we're not going to make this huge pattern of the massive skirt, but we're going to make the pattern called the arc. This is called our arc. It's called the arc pattern. And we can see that, you can see the radius here. That's just like a quarter circle. You can see the radius here. And you can see the radius. This is the middle of the circle. And this part here, which represents a quarter of the circle, is a quarter of the circumference. Now, one thing is sure is that we know the circumference. That is already known. And there's no doubt about that. We already know our waist. We know whichever edge we're intending to join our flared skirt onto. But one thing we don't know is the radius. And that's how we're going to calculate our pattern. We have to do a little bit of calculations. Now this is not too much, but I'm sure it's something you're going to be comfortable with. It's very easy. Don't worry, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So we're going to see how we're going to do the calculations. So why don't we look at the measurements we will need to make our skirts. These are the measurements we're going to use to make our skirts. Now we have the waist, which is a known measurement, which is our waist. Our waist is 25 inches. That's what we're going to be using to make the skirt. Now we have three different lengths here to practice with. We have our fully flared length here. We're going to use a mini length, which is 16 inches. Then we have the semi-flared length. That's going to be quite long. We're going to use 30 inches for that. Then we also have the quarter flared that we're going to use as 24 inches. Now we have this varied length so that you can play around with it. So the first thing is that for our fully flared length, we're going to add ½ inch to the waistline and ½ inch to the hem. Now because you're going to use your industrial weaving machine to just weave it up, so that because it's a flare, you cannot sew it all around. Well, you could try to do that, but that could be tasking. So you can use your industrial weaving machine to weave it all up. So I'm going to add 1 inch to each of these lengths. That means that for the fully flared, I'll add 1 inch. That will give me 17. To the semi-flared, I'll add 1 inch. That's 31. To the quarter flared, I'll add 1 inch. That will give me 25. Like I told you, we want to work out our arc pattern. This is our arc pattern that we're trying to work out. We're trying to determine what the radius is. We don't know that. But what we surely know, we already know our waist. And of course, we definitely know that. That means that we know the 1/4. We know the quarter of that waist. This is giving me 1/4 of the circumference. Circumference. Now if I divide my waist into 4, I'll get 6 1/4. That is what this place gives me. This arc I have here, that is already known. This is going to give me 6 1/4 inches. That is already known, but what I don't know is my radius. Now there are two ways you can calculate that. You can use the mathematical method and you can also use the gauging method. That's about trial and error, obviously. But we're going to take care of the mathematical method. Now the first thing we need to know is what is the equation for finding the radius? And that's very simple. It's just the same that we use to calculate the circumference. And that will give us C equals to 2 pi r. As simple as that. Now, what we're going to do is to try and work this out as much as possible before we arrive at the answer. Now, to do this, we know that pi is 22/7. So the first thing we need to do is to try and substitute that a little. So we'll have to start with this. C equals to, let me just get this around here so that we'll know what we're doing. C now equals to 2 into bracket 22/7 times r. I'm going to open that up a little, so I'll give you C equals to 44/7r, because I just multiplied 2 times 7. That's all I have to do. And I get my 44/7, and that will multiply by r. Now, after I've done this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to multiply both sides by 7, because I'm trying to see how I'm going to make r the subject of the formula. So that's what I'm doing that. So I'll just take my 7, I multiplied by C. I multiply C with 7, and that will give me 7 times 44/7r. In mathematics, once you have this, you know you're going to cross, 7 will cross this out. 7 will cross 7 out, so you cross those out. So when you cross that out, what you're left with is 7C equals to 44r. So you can see that we're very close to making r the subject of the formula. So I'm going to take this and divide both sides by 44. Very clever. That's why mathematics is very good for life. So I take that, 7C divided by 44 would give me 44/44. You can see that. Now once I've done this, what do? I just cancel 44 with 44, and then what I'm left with is r. You can see that. So now that gives me, I'll now change this to the other side, and that will be r equals to 7C/44. Easy. Now once we've done this, we already know that yes, this is r. So now I know my C. So all I have to do is substitute C with my measurement, which is 25 inches. So that will give me r equals to 7 times 25 divided by 44. Let's go back up here. That will be r equals to, if we calculate 7 times 25, you get 175. You get 175 divided by 44. Now just take a minute and try and calculate that with your calculator or with your phone. And that will give us, r will give us 3.97. You can see it's very, very close to 4. So I'm going to just approximate it to 4 inches. That will be approximated to 4. Now this is the mathematical method, and it's very accurate. So I would advise that we always use this. But I can tell you, you can actually try to do trial and error. That's a gauging method where you just try and gauge it out. You know, I'll show you that on the table so that you'll understand how to gauge. But I would rather that we use and stick to the mathematical method. So now that we have already calculated our r, this is 4 inches. So if you look at it very well, for our fully flared skirt, our radius, fully flared radius, let me put it that way, our fully flared radius is 4 inches. That's for our fully flared radius. Now for any type of skirt you're planning to make, whether it's a semi-flared or a quarter flare, we have to start by getting our fully flared radius. Because without this, we would not be able to calculate the radius for the other types of skirts. So for our semi-flared radius, what I would do is take this 4 inches I have here And all I do is multiply it by 2. That's 4 times 2 will give me 8. That's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use 8 inches for my semi-flared radius. I'm not going to use 4 inches. Now, for my fully flared radius, I'm going to take my fabric and fold it into 4. That's lengthwise and widthwise. But for my semi-flared skirt, all I have to do is just fold my fabric into 2, just widthwise, that's all. Now let's look at our quarter flared. For our quarter flared radius, I'm sure you can guess what we're going to do because it's a quarter. We're going to take this same fully flared radius we have here and multiply it by 4. That would be 4 inches times 4, and that will give us 16 inches. Now, I would not fold my fabric at all. I will use it as single ply, just like that. And you can see the differences. We're making our fully flared skirt. We have to fold it into 4, and we'll use 4 inches. We're making a semi-flared skirt. We'll fold it into 2 only, and we'll use 8 inches. And of course, for our quarter flared skirt, we would not fold it at all. We'll just use it single ply. So let's go to the table and see how this works out. What I'm going to show you is how we're going to gauge, using the gauging method, how we're going to gauge our radius. Like I told you, it's about trial and error. You're not so sure whether you will come out with the answer the first time you try it. That's why it's gauging. It's called gauging method. So let me use this edge and I'll show you what I mean. Now, because I already know the waist is 25 inches. So because I know the waist, what I would do is I have a quarter of the waist, which is 6 1/4. And I place my finger on where the 6 1/4 is. And all I do is I just take it to the edge of my paper. You can see that I have an edge here, a corner here. So I'm going to just take it and now place it on both sides and just try to see whether I can get it as a perfect arc. I'm not sure, but I'm trying my best to see whether I can come up with something. So what I do is that I now mark on both sides. I mark on both sides and I choose one. Now I'll just choose one. I'm not sure which one is right, but I'll choose one. Now if I take a look at this, what I have here is like I have about, say, this is like close to 3 3/4. Okay, what I have here is actually 3/5/8. So let me use 3/5/8 and check it out how it looks like. And now what I will just do with just being, I'll now take it from this point and just begin to measure out. Let me put it this direction. So all I just begin to do is I begin to measure. You can see that this is 3/5/8. So I'm just measuring. I'll just be measuring 3/5/8 as I go, putting the points there, 3/5/8. I'm still just gauging it. I just took one side, so I'm checking it out. That's 3/5/8. Now you can see that this other side is longer than 3/5/8 because I'm still gauging. So I'll just connect these dots like this. Now we have connected the dots, so I'll just check this line to see what measurement I have there. So I'll just place it directly on top of the line like that. I'm just tracing, using my tape rule to trace it like that. Now what I have here is 5/5/8. That's what I have here. It's not even up to 6 1/4 that I really need. Wow. So what do? I try again. I add a little bit more. Maybe let me check this other side, what I have here. What I have here is actually like, I have 3/7/8. Let me use 3/7/8 and see whether I can get what I'm looking for. Like I told you, you see it's gauging. We're still gauging. We're not sure. That's why it's better to use a mathematical method. So, 3/7/8 is almost 4 inches. So maybe if I just use that, maybe I might get it. So I just keep on checking it. 3/7 is just 1/8 less than 4 inches. Okay, I'll now connect those dots again. I'll connect my dots again and now check it one more time. I hope by now we should be able to get at least close to our 6 1/4 that we're looking for. So I'll check that. Wow, what I have here is 6 1/8. At least I'm close to what I'm looking for. You can see how hectic it is to keep on trying out the gauging method. But we're close home. What we have is 6 1/8. So why don't we try out our radius the radii that we have calculated. We've calculated for our fully flared, we've calculated for our semi-flared, and we've also calculated for our quarter flare. Now, I've already given you a tip of the iceberg, so definitely you know how to go about it. So since my radius for my fully flared is 4 inches, all I just have to do from this corner, you must always get your corner. I just begin to measure out 4 inches, like that. Till I get to the other line, which is at the corner, and I connect all my dots. So, just follow me as I do that. So I'll just mark out 4 inches here because we need to cut out our skirts. We're going to be making the fully flared skirt, but I'd like to show you how to cut out all these skirts so that you understand how to cut them out. But the one we're going to be making will be the fully flared skirt. All right, so let's connect the dots. Let's check it out just to be sure whether we're on the right track. So, cool. That's 6 1/4. So we're on the right track. This is for our fully flared. Now let's take another corner. I'm going to mark out the radius for my semi-flared skirt. Now, all I have to do is measure out 8 inches. I mark it out, 8 inches all the way around. Now, if you had a very big compass or a big protractor, that will help you to connect these dots. All you just have to do is put your pen inside the kind you use for technical drawing in secondary school. You just put your pen inside and you now, expand it to the amount of, measurements you need for the radius. And all you just do is that you put your pin in here and just connect it. And you're done in seconds. Okay, so I've done that, so I'll just connect my dots. Now this should give me half of my waist. So that means what I'm looking for is 12.5 inches. So let me check that. Yeah, we're on the right track. Now I want to measure out my quarter flared radius. Now that is 16 inches. So what I need to do is just mark out 16 inches here. Same way I did the others, just mark it out 16 inches. 16 inches like that. Let's see whether we can get that. Okay, yes, we should be able to get that out here. Very close to our semi-flared radius. Okay. So we've done we've marked out the point for our quarter flared arc. So I connect all those points like that. This is easier. This is the easier way to connect it. Wow. So you can see that now we have 3 arcs here. This is for semi-flared. Let me put that here. Let me put semi here. Let me put quarter here. And let's put full. I'll just put fully here. So you have that there. So let's cut these out. Now, if you're making a very long skirt, you definitely know that we cannot cut it on this small size table. So the best thing is that we need to go down to the floor so we can have enough space to cut it out. But I'll start by cutting my fully flared on the table first before I go down to the floor to cut my semi-flare and my quarter flare. I need large space to do that. Now we have cut out these arcs. Let's pick our fabric and begin to cut. The fabric we're going to use to cut out our flares. It's an Ankara fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do will be to calculate how much fabric I'm going to need. Now, I already have my fully flared arc here, which is 4 inches. Now, I've already told you that the length of my fully flared skirt is going to be 17 inches, and it's a slightly mini skirt. So I'm going to add 17 to 4 inches. That will give me 21 inches. Now, because I told you we're going to have to fold our fabric lengthwise and then widthwise, or you can fold it widthwise and then lengthwise, whichever way it works both ways. So I need to get a square because I need to get out the measurements equally on both sides. So that means that I need 42 inches by 42 inches for me to cut this out. So for me to do that, I'll first of all check the width of my fabric. Because this is Ankara, the width is most times not more than 43, 45 or thereabouts. That's why for Ankara you may not be able to get a long fully flared skirt. And if you must get a long fully flared skirt, you'll have to join it at the sides. And that will be so bulky, I'm sure you wouldn't like it. Alright, so let me check this. This is my width. This is the width of the fabric, you can see. This is the selve edge, and this is the selve edge. So I'll just check that to be sure. What I have here is 45 inches, so that's enough for what I need. So all I need to do now is just to measure out my 42 inches. I'll just add a little extra just for, you know, exigencies, or just to be sure that you don't have a problem. Because at times the way fabric is woven, it could be woven in a very funny way. So you're not sure whether you would have the same measurements both sides. So you need to measure. I'll just add 2 inches. That will give me 44 inches. So I have 44 inches here. So all I need to do right now is just to fold it at both sides and cut it out. So once I fold this side here, I pin it. I fold the other side and measure. I measure out 44 inches on the other side. Okay. Now once I've gotten that, all I just need to do is just to pin it on the other side and cut it out. I cut that line out. Okay, so this is the material we're going to use. I'll just fold the others and put it aside so that we can cut out . So this is the fabric we're using to cut it out. So all I just need to do is fold it lengthwise and widthwise. Make sure it's equal on both sides. So once I've done this, I'll just smoothen it out. You can use your iron, your pressing iron, to just smoothen the fabric out if it's very rough. So I think I could just use my palm. It should be fine. Good. So once I've done this, you can see that I folded it on the wrong side. So I'll take my fully flared arc and pin it to this corner here. You can see that. So now all I just need to do is just begin to measure my 17 inches. Let me see what I have here. I actually have up to 18. Let me see whether I could just... Fine. So I could even add an extra inch to the length. So let me make it into 18 rather than using my 17 that I had planned to use. That will make it slightly longer. That's okay. So all I just need to do now, since my new length is 18 inches, I just begin to mark out 18 from the edge. Now what I could also do is add my 4 inches to my 18, which will give me 22. And all I just need to do is measure it all the way from the top like that. That means I have already added my radius length and the length of my skirt together. It's the same way. You can decide to mark out 18 from here or decide to mark out 22 from the tip. Whichever one it's easier for you, you can do. I'll just mark out 18 from the edge of my arc. Okay, sorry, I think I marked out 17 there. This is 18. You can see I'm getting out the marked points. So what I just do is just begin to connect those points. So you can see what I have done. I have curved it out. Now there's what we call the correction point on the edge, the middle part of our flare. Now if you look at this, the middle point of our flare, which is directly from the center, just middle all the way to this point here, This represents the cross grain of your fabric, and it's very natural for it to drop at points that are, because this is the elasticated portion of your fabric. Remember our crossways strip, how we cut it? We cut it at that diagonal portion. So this is the point that drops and has elasticated. So we need to reduce the length here, because if it's a very soft fabric like chiffon or organza, for instance, you will find out that once you're wearing it, you will find it droop down at those points. And we don't want our flared skirt looking like that. So we need to reduce that. So because it's Ankara and it's cotton, so we don't need to take too much. If the fabric is soft, the softer the fabric, the more the measurements we're going to measure at that point. So all I just need to do is use like 3/4 of an inch, because number one, the length is short. At the same time, the fabric is not that soft. So once I get the midpoint here, I just measured out 3/4 inches here. And I will just mark out like about 6 or 7 inches from this point here, and at the same here, and I just curve that. This is 6 inches. Now if it's wider, if the fabric is bigger, you know, maybe when we're making a semi-flared skirt, we'll see that. We may need to take more than 6 inches. We may need to take like maybe about 8 inches. So what I'm going to do now is just take it from there and just correct that part there. You can see as I'm just, and I just try to blend it back into my 6 inches. Now, because I know that at this point here, it's easier for it to droop down than at this other point, because this is on the straight grain, it would not be elasticated. This is also on the straight grain, it won't be elasticated. But the middle here would be elasticated. So once I've done that and I've corrected it, I just pin all the layers together and I cut out. So since I've already cut this out, I cut out the edge first before I cut out my arc. Now, this is a full circle. So, and I don't have any joining. So because I want to put in a zip there, I'll just slit open one of the sides. Okay, whichever side we decide. Okay, let's use this. We already have our flare. It looks so nice. You can see how flared it looks like. I can't wait to see it on the mannequin yet. Now, but the next thing we're going to do now, before we get down to cutting our quarter flared and our semi-flared, we need to cut out the lining that we're going to use. Now, because this is the one we're working on, we're going to cut out the lining. And the lining will be 3 inches shorter than the actual length. So I'll fold it back. Okay, now I've folded it back. I'll now take my lining. I have a lining here that I'm going to use. So I'll just take this. I'll take it and fold it into 4. Let me see if I have enough length there. This is a little less, but since we're still going to subtract, it doesn't really matter. So we'll just take that and fold it into 4. Now I've folded it into 4 now. So I'll now take my flare and place it on it. I'm still going to reduce the length so it's okay. Because at times if you don't have enough lining, you're just wondering, oh, can I still get what I need to get out of here? You can. Good. So you can see that this is already less by like around 3 inches as I want to subtract from it. So I'll pin it in place. So I'll cut out the waist. So I'll remove the pins. Now, you can see, like I told you, we already have less than what we need. So, because this could happen and you don't have enough lining to take care of this, what will you do? So all I just need to do is subtract 3 inches from the rest. Mark it there. I'm not going to, because I don't want it to smear all over my lining, so I'll just give it as points. So since I've done that, I'll just connect it like that. Good. So I pin it. So I'll just cut it along those points I just made. So now we've taken care of our lining. So what I need to do is just open out one side, just like we did for the skirt. So I already have my lining here. So this is my lining. You can see how it flares too. So let's put that away. Let's just notch the middle. Let's do that also for our skirt, because you need to know the center. Just pin that away. Now it's very important to note that this fully flared that we have cut out already has incorporated our zip allowance. And I'm sure you're wondering how that is. Now remember that whenever we're making anything around the curve, we need to subtract seam allowance. Remember that for the necklines. It's just the same way. What we've done is that we just left it without subtracting the seam allowance. And now we have, because we have left that, we're going to be having an extra 2 inches or about maybe 3 inches to make our zip width. Now that's intentional. But if, for instance, you just want to attach, your fully flared, piece to the break of your skirt, and you don't really need to have an opening like we have just done here. All you need to do is subtract 2 inches from your circumference. That means you subtract 2 inches from maybe your break measurement, or your waist, or maybe your sleeve edge, or your blouse, wherever you want to put your fully flared without having an opening. We need to subtract 2 inches. That means if your break, for instance, is 34 inches, I'm not going to make my fully flared radius with 34 inches. I won't. I would subtract 2 inches from it first, and that will give me 32. Now with 32, I would now calculate my radius and work with it. Now what you will notice would be, by the time you're done with that, you would get a slightly smaller circumference than what your actual break is. But by the time you notch it round and you pin it, you'll see it will just fit snugly. That's how it's meant to be. So let's get to the floor and see how we're going to cut out our semi-flared and our quarter-flared skirt. Now I have this fabric I've already cut. What I did was that I took my semi-flared arc, that is 8 inches. I added it to the 31 inches I needed for the length of my skirt, and that will give me 39 inches. Now, of course, because I have to double this, I have to add extra and multiply it by 2. That means that I added 1 inch. That gave me 40. Now multiplied it by 2. That will give me 80. So that's what I have here. And all I just needed to do was just fold it into 2, exactly as I told you we would do. So I'll now take my semi-flared arc and place it at the edge here, and then pin it to that point. Now you can see that we've already pinned it there. So all I just need to do would begin to measure out the length. My length is 31 inches, so that's all I'm going to begin to measure. 31 inches. I mark it at distances like that. If you're not sure about the distances you're leaving, it's better to make the distances quite close so that you won't have too much gap to cover. This is my 31. So let me just connect these ones as they're here. It's easier to connect as you're seeing them. So let me do the rest here. So I'll now connect the other points that I have here. Now we're going to do the correction to the center. This will give me my center here. You can look at that point. This will be my center. I'm going to measure in 1 inch. The other one we did was 3/4 because of the length. So I'll now mark out like 8 inches here and 8 inches over here. And all I just need to do is, take it through that point that I have already made from that 8 inches there. Let's take it through that point there, like that. And I just smoothen it to the end also, just like the way I started. Now this will take some practice, so don't be annoyed if it doesn't come out the way you expect. We'll just smoothen it so that you have a smooth line starting from here, going through here, like that. So once I've done that, I'll just pin it in place so that it doesn't shift. I'll now take my scissors and I'll cut it out. I'll cut slightly above the red marker so that I don't have the stain on my fabric. Just slightly above it. Okay, so once I've cut that, I just need to cut out the waist. So we're done with this. Don't forget that if you choose to make your semi-flared skirt, because you can choose any of them to make, always make sure that you notch the center. So this is how our semi-flared skirt looks like. Let me unpin it at the base. I'm going to show you on the mannequin how each drops so that you'll understand the different kinds of flare and how they flare out and which appeal they each have. You can see that this is not as flared as the fully flared skirt that we just made, that we just cut before now. You can see that it's nice, but it's not as flared as it is. So now let's pick our quarter flared pattern, our arc. Let's put this aside. This is another fabric that we're going to use to cut out our quarter flare skirt. Now what I did was, the length of my quarter flare is 25 inches and this is 16 inches. I just added them together, I got 41. I added an extra inch just to be sure, and I had 42 inches, and that's all I had to do. All I had to do was cut out a square that's 42 by 42 inches. Let's do this on the wrong side this time around. So I just place it on the floor like I did the other one. Don't forget that I'm not folding it. I'm just going to leave it as it is because it just has to be single ply. And I'll take my quarter flared arc here. I pin it down. So once I've pinned that down, I now begin to measure out the length that I need. Don't forget that my length is 25 inches. So all I need to do is mark out 25. So since I've gotten here, let me connect these points. Let me come to this side. Okay, you can see that it's exactly the length that I have here. So I measure up my 25 inches. So I get the center as usual, which is somewhere here. I mark up around 1 inch. And I still leave my 8 inches here. So I curve this to meet the edge I have left here. And I do the same here. Can you see that? So we'll now cut it out. Let me go from this side. Don't forget to cut slightly above the red line so that your fabric is not stained. Come this side and finish it up. Now we have cut this side out, so all we need to do is cut out the waist. Now we're done. You can see this is our A-line skirt or quarter flared skirt. You can see it's just slightly flared. You can see that. You can see the slight flare that we have there is not as much as a semi-flared. So let's check each of these out on the mannequin, how it looks like. So I'm sure you can see how our fully flared skirt looks like. See how it falls. You can see the flare lines, how it looks like. It flares really well. This is how the fully flared looks. It's really, really nice and fully flared. Let's see how the semi-flared skirt looks like. So this is our semi-flared skirt. You can see it's not as flared as our fully flared skirt, but it just nicely falls and nicely drapes down. You can see it looks really nice, but it's not as flared as our fully flared skirt. Let's see how our quarter flared skirt looks like. Now take a look at our A-line skirt. Well, that's the reason why they call it A-line. It's our quarter flared skirt, but it just looks like a, letter A, like a normal skirt, and just flares out gently at the edge of the hemline. That's why it's called the A-line skirt. You can see that we don't really see any flare at all. It just